We're off to Daf70a-70b, but what I have to go is we have to go back a little bit, about halfway through the Amid, to get a flow going, because I also want to clarify one point, because I don't think this was clear, and I think this will help. The sugya that we're dealing with is what's called tumas nevela. Tumas nevela means that when the animal dies, the animal becomes tameh. Now, when it comes to animals, it's tameh that if you touch it or carry it, you're tameh. When it comes to birds, you're only tameh if you swallow it, if you put it in your mouth. So, we know there's such a concept that shchita can remove the tumas nevela. Fine. But here's the point that I think is very important to realize. Before we get to the machlokes Rav Yehuda and Meir, this is the point that's incredibly significant. There's a difference between birds and animals regarding non-kosher species. And this is a little bit confusing from the Gemara. This is, I think, we have to know Chumash. So that's why we're doing this again now, so days later. So when it comes to birds, there is a tumas nevela on kosher birds only. If a non-kosher bird dies, there is no tumas nevela. But when it comes to animals, it's not like this. When it comes to animals, there's a unique halacha, and that is, by a kosher animal, if the animal dies, there's a tumas nevela, except on the chaylev. The chaylev of that animal, the fats of that animal that cover the kidneys, that not tameh. So 98% of the animal is tameh, except for the chaylev. When it comes to non-kosher animals like a chazer, everything's tameh. So when it comes to birds and animals are the same, that non-kosher species are different than kosher species, but the difference is that by birds, non-kosher species have no tumah. By animals, non-kosher animals are incredibly tameh. I could take that even the chaylev is tameh. That's the difference. I want to make that point clear. Now let's go back to the sugya. We're in the middle of a machlokes between Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda. It's like this. When it comes to an animal, if you shecht an animal, the tumas nevela goes away. What if you find out the animal's a treifa? The tumas nevela still goes away. So if you find the animal's treifa, there's no tumah. Tumas nevela is gone. The shaila is, what if I shecht a bird and find out that it's a treifa? So machlokes Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda. Rav Meir says the tumah goes away because there's a hekish between birds and animals, and just like by animals the shechita removes the tumah, so do birds removes the tumah. Rav Yehuda disagrees. And now what we're going to do is we're going to flow. This entire daf is just drushes. It's bing, 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 back and forth drushes, but we'll hopefully be able to do this. And we're going to be halfway through the Amid. First line is my time of the Rav Yehuda. Samach base. My time of the Rav Yehuda. What's the source? Rav Yehuda, my timer. What's Rav Yehuda's reasoning that he holds that it's dafka by an animal, but if you shecht a bird and you find that the bird's a treifa, there is tumas nevela? So says the Gemara, Kra eshkach b'dar, because there's a pasuk. The pasuk describes birds tumah by tumas nevela by a bird. It says nevela or treifa, and as I mentioned yesterday, the word treifa is extra because the tumah really sticks. It really takes place when the animal dies, when the bird dies. When the bird's alive, there's no tumah. So the word treifa is just a reason it's a cause of death. So why does the pasuk have to mention treifa? So treifa is extra. So says Rav Yehuda, the word treifa is to tell you that by a bird, if you shech the bird and find that it's a treifa, it's still tameh. So the word treifa, this is going to be the crux of today's daf. What is the word treifa teaching you? So according to Rav Yehuda, because it's extra by birds, it's extra by animals too. So Rav Yehuda says the word treifa by a bird is to tell you that if you shech the bird and you find that it's a treifa, the tumah remains. Okay. Says the Gemara nevela treifa. I'm Rav Yehuda treifa lama nemra im treifa chay hari nevela mura im treifa nechay hari b'chal nevela el lahavi treifa sheshachta shematama. So according to Rav Yehuda, the word treifa by a bird, which is extra, is to tell you that if you shech the bird and you find that it's a treifa, it's tameh. Here's the problem. The problem is that same word treifa is found by animals. And let me just explain. By a kosher animal, the halacha is that when the animal dies, the animal is tameh except for the chaylev. Now it says the same thing by treifa. So if you use your formula, that should mean that by a treifa, if you shech the animal and you find that it's a treifa, the entire animal's tameh. Not everything's tameh. Again, not the chaylev. Again, the chaylev will not be tameh by a kosher animal. Animal, not the chaylev. But the point is, if you say the word treifa means that if you shecht it's still tameh, then that should be true by an animal as well. And that's not true. So in other words, you have the word treifa by a bird, you have a treifa by an animal, both extra. By a bird, you're telling me that it means that the animal's tameh if you find that it's a treifa. By the animal, it's not like that. So that's the issue. What do you use the word treifa for by an animal? Because you can't darshan it the same way you're darshaning it by a bird, because it's not true. So says the Gemara, the pasuk says by a kosher animal, chaylev nevela, chaylev treifa, that when the animal is tameh, the chaylev is not. That's the rules of tumas nevela by a kosher animal. So says the Gemara, hasam nami nema. According to you, you should make the same formula. The word treifa is extra to tell you that if you shecht a cow you find out it has a punctured lung, the animal is tameh. But that's not true. Says the Gemara, Hachanami im treifa chayri b'chan nevela umura. Im treifa nachayri b'chan nevela. Elhavi treifa shechta shechal v'tahar mechlal dihi tameya. That should mean that a kosher animal that gets shechted, and you find that it's a treifa, that has the laws of tumas nevela, which is again, the chaylev is tahar, but the animal is tameh. So that's what you should say, because that's what you're saying by the birds, and that's not true. And says the Gemara, Va'amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Amila Masisan Tana, B'chiyamas V'nehema, Miktas Behem Matam, Miktas Ein Bahamada, Ve'ezazuzu Treifa Sheshachta. So the question is, again, Rav Yehuda is saying that if you shecht a bird and find that it's a treifa, the bird is tameh, from the extra word treifa, but that same word treifa is by an animal. So what does he do with the animal? That's the question. What does he do with the word treifa by a behema? That's the question. So says the Gemara, Ela treifa, miboy le'lemute tmeya. You know what the halach is? You know what he uses the word treifa for by an animal? It's not extra anymore. What does he use it for? He's using it to tell you that these laws do not apply to non-kosher animals. Now, what do I mean? I mean that if a chazer dies, then everything's tameh. Everything's tameh. Meaning, there is tumas nevela. That's the difference. By a bird, there's no tumah. By a chazer, everything's tameh, even the chaylev. So it's saying that these laws of tumah, which is animal being tameh, but not the chaylev, do not apply to chazer. And that's what he uses the word treifa for, because treifa implies that the sugya we're dealing with are animals that treifa is relevant. Treifa is not relevant to chazer. Again, this is part of the confusing thing. In the vernacular of people, they call non-kosher treif. Treif is not a term that's used for non-kosher. Tameya is non-kosher. Because treif means it's a kosher animal, but there's a hole in the lungs. Chazer is never treif. They call it chazer treif. That's how people talk, but it's not accurate. Chazer is not treif. Therefore, the word treif tells me this parsha is not talking about chazer. Okay. So the word treif is no longer extra by an animal, telling me it doesn't apply to chazer. Here's the issue. Say that same thing by a bird. Again, the word treif is found by bird, and the word treif is found by animal. How you doing? Treif is found by bird, treif is found by animal. There's like a couple people downstairs. There's like two other people downstairs. We have to find out. I don't know the cheshbon of. I think on Sunday they just like send like a whole crew. Whatever. Oh, afterwards? Oh, okay, fine. All right, fine. So they're leaving here? No. Oh, I hope so. So anyway, the point is, the word treif is found by birds, the word treif is found by animal. By birds, he's using it to tell me that if you shech the bird and you find that it's treif, it's tameh. But by animal, he's darshaning it to exclude chazer. So by birds also use it to exclude an owl. It's the exact same thing. The problem is, the word treif by an animal, you're using it for A, then the same thing by birds. So says the Gemara,
by a bird, the word treifa doesn't mean just treifa, it means nevela. It means any tummy, any type of non-kosher.
No. Let's not ask. No. Don't assume. By a bird, the word treif is telling me that if I shech the bird and you find out it's treif, it has a treifa in it, has a hole in its lungs, it remains tummy. By treif by an animal, he's using it to exclude chazer. So says the Gemara, so the Gemara says the same thing by birds. Hachanami, by birds as well. Use the word treifa to exclude birds and to say that the laws of nevela do not apply to owls, which is true. So says the Gemara, we're about to get up to the new Gemara of what we did yesterday. The answer is, Rav Yehuda knows that these laws do not apply to owls or to eagles or to non-kosher species from the word nevela. So the word treifa is now extra to tell me that if I shech the bird and you find that it's treif, there's still tumas nevela. Says the Gemara, Oif tam the Rabbi Yehuda min nevela nafkale. The Tan Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Yochol, tehei nevelas oif tamim mitame begadim abei sabliya. You might think that a non-kosher bird that's dead also has tuma. Tamal Omer, nevela u treifa lo yoichal. The pasuk says regarding the sugya, it says nevela and treifa. Nevela and treifa are not terms that apply to non-kosher birds. Non-kosher birds are not nevelas. Nevela implies a kosher animal that was not shechted properly. A non-kosher bird is not asa because it's a nevela. It's asa because it's an owl. It's also because it's an eagle. It's not the word nevela doesn't apply. Mishi isur misham bal teichal nevela yatzeh she'in isur misham bal teichal nevela el misham bal teichal tameh. So now we're up to the top of Ayin Amid Beis. Amid Aleph. Hainami tepakle mechel of nevela. So says the Gemara, the same thing by an animal. use the word nevela to tell me that these laws do not apply to an animal, meaning a non-kosher chazer, that if a chazer dies, the entire thing is tamei. Learn that out from the word nevela. So now the word treifa is now extra again. And we're back to the original problem. What does he do with the word treifa by an animal? So says the Gemara, so we're back to the original problem, which is, the Rabbi Yehuda is using the word treifa by a bird to tell me that if I shecht a bird and you find out it's treif, it's tamei, not like Rav Meir. That's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. So what is the word treifa by an animal? And you can't say that same drasha because it's not true by an animal. So what does he use the word treifa by an animal for? That's the question. So says the Gemara, a couple attempts. That's what we're dealing with. What does he use the word treifa by an animal? So says the Gemara, attempt number 1. Maybe it's to tell me that a chaya has the same status as a kosher animal. Okay, let me explain. What's the laws of a kosher animal when it comes to tumas nevela? When the animal dies, not shechted, when the animal dies, a cow dies, the entire animal is tamei, except for the chaylev. Non-kosher animal, everything's tamei. So not the same. The question is, what about a chaya? A chaya is a kosher animal, but it's not a domesticated animal. It's a wild animal, like a deer type of animal, a buffalo, these type of things. The halacha by a chaya is that you can eat the chaylev. That's the major difference between kosher and non-kosher. So it says the Gemara, the word treif by an animal tells me that a chaya has the same laws as a kosher animal, which means that when a deer dies, or when ibex, whatever these animals are, and they die, the animal is tamei, except for the chaylev. The chaylev is not. So again, you have two choices. You got kosher animals, chaylev is not tamei. Non-kosher animals, chaylev is tamei. Where do you put a chaya? So the Gemara is saying the word treifa tells me that a chaya is like a kosher animal. Okay. No, it's just a svara. You might think. You might think that, why would I think a chaya is a kosher animal? Why would I put chaya in the category of chazer? I'll tell you why. Because kosher animals, what's the whole point of this halacha? What's the one part of the animal that's different between kosher and non-kosher when it comes to tumah? It's the chaylev. Chaya, you can eat the chaylev. So maybe this special law that chaylev is not tamei by a kosher species is because you can't eat it. But a chaya where you can eat the chaylev, so the chaylev is different than a kosher animal. So maybe it should become tamei like a chazer. Kamashal, no, it's like a kosher. So right now we're saying the word treifa, according to Rabbi Yehuda, by an animal is telling me that a chaya that dies, the chaylev is tahar. Says the Gemara, that's not true. First of all, 2 reasons. Non-kosher animal, everything's tamei, including the chaylev. Kosher animal, everything's tamei except for the chaylev. The chaylev is different. Does that make sense? Yes. Why? Because when you have a cow, what could you eat of this cow? Everything except the chaylev. So when you're having the cow, everything's on one side, you put the chaylev on the other. So when it comes to tumah, everything's on one side, chaylev on the other. Chazer, it's all tamei. Why? Because chazer's all aser. A chaya, what would you put a chaya in? A chaya, everything's mutter. I would not separate chaylev by a chaya. I wouldn't do that. I would do that by a kosher animal, a regular domesticated kosher animal, but a chaya where the entire animal has the same laws. It's the mirror image of a chazer. A chazer has everything tamei, everything puzzle. This has everything mutter. But why would I say that the chaylev is different? That doesn't make sense. Also, secondarily, there's a drasha that says that the chaylev of a chaya is tamei. So, I understand that, but if you're separating chaylev from the rest, I would not separate chaylev by a chaya, considering the entire animal, including the chaya, is edible. So why would I make a differentiation between chaylev and the rest? So it says the Gemara, why would I separate by a chaya? The chaylev is the same. It doesn't make sense. And also on Amid Beis, we actually have a drasha that says that the chaylev of a chaya is tamei. So what you're saying is incorrect. Back to the original problem. What does Rabbi Yehuda do with the word tameya? We thought it had to do with chaya. It doesn't. So back to the drawing board. So it says the Gemara, El Amr Abaya, Treif v'legufe itzrich, shaloi toimar, hoyel utmeya asur mechayim, utreifa asur mechayim, ma tameya chel v'tamei, af treifa chel v'tamei. The Gemara saw a strange thing. Again, what's the law of a kosher animal that dies? The animal is tamei except for the chaylev. You have the word treif, it's extra. So he says, you know what the word treif is telling me? Very simple. If an animal dies because it's a treifa, so it didn't just get a heart attack, it had a hole in its lungs, so they knew like a month before they went to the vet, they saw there's a hole in his lungs. So the vet says, that's a treifa, okay? And then the animal dies a month later. You know what the halacha is? The pasuk is telling me that the chaylev of that animal is tahar, meaning that that animal is the same as a kosher animal that just got a heart attack. Let me explain. When an animal is kosher and has an nevela, it has certain halachas. Tameh except for the chaylev. What do you do with the word treifa? So the Gemara says treifa is not extra. I'll tell you what. Treifa has to tell me that if an animal dies because it's a treifa, it's the same as an animal dying because of a heart attack. Why would I think otherwise? I'll tell you why. It's a strange thing. Think of categories. You have on the right side, you have a nevela, which is a kosher animal that had a heart attack. Put over there. Has its halachas. Then you have chazer. Its halachas. The Gemara says, I would actually think to put treifa in the chazer category. Why? It's a kosher animal. I'll tell you why. And it's a shver havamina. The Gemara is going to reject it in a minute. The Gemara says, I'll tell you why. When is a chazer aser? When is the issue with a chazer created? When it dies? No. When it's alive. When it's walking around, there's a chazer. It's a problem. When is the issue of treifa created? When it dies? No. When the animal's still alive. So I would actually think to put treifa in the category of chazer. The pasuk says, no. It's still a cow. So treifa, it has the laws of other cows. The havamina is, I would think that because treifa is an issue that emerges when the animal's alive, it's actually more comparable to a chazer than to a cow that gets a heart attack. Kamash one, no. So it's not extra. Okay. So the Gemara says, Matmei chalvatame, af treifa chalvatame. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. How do we get into all this? We got into all this because the word treifa by a bird, Rabbi Yehuda feels is extra, and what does it come to teach you? It comes to teach you that if you shecht a bird and you find that it's treif, the animal's still tameh, even though you shechted it because it's treif. What about an animal? The animal, no, it has to tell me that it's not a chazer. So say the same thing by a bird. If a bird's treif, not to say that if you shecht it, the animal's tameh. No, just the word treif is not extra anymore. What does it tell you? That if a bird is found to be treif, it does not have the laws of chazer, it does not have the laws of an owl, it has the laws of a kosher species. Meaning the same way you're telling me that treif by an animal is not extra anymore because I needed to tell me that a treif cow has the status of a cow and not a chazer. So the same thing, a treif chicken has the status of chicken and not an owl. Say the exact same thing. What's your response? Why would I think a chicken is an owl? So then why would I think a cow is a chazer? That's the point. Says the Gemara, Ihachi hainanami miboy, shaloi toimar, hoil va'oiv tamei asa b'achilo, treif asur b'achilo, ma'oiv tamei in tamei af treif in metama. So the Gemara says, va'oid, just stam, mi'ikol amel of treif in metama. I don't understand, what's your havamina? I would think, you tell me the word treif is not extra by a cow, because I need to know that if a cow is treif, it has the halachas of a cow and not a chazer. Why would I think it's a chazer? Says the Gemara, Tamei lo hois l'shas kosher. A tameya, a chazer was never kosher. At least the cow, even if it's treif, it had its good moments. It had moments. It's a kosher species. It had its moments where it was mutter. So says the Gemara, V'chitem a treif and mibeten. What about a cow that was born as a treif? You could have a cow. But the answer is, it's still in the species of kosher animals. How could I think that a cow would be the same as a chazer? There's no way. Says the Gemara, B'mina mi'ika. Back to the original problem. Again, what does Rabbi Yehuda do with the word treif by an animal? So says the Gemara, Ela Amar Rava, Hatayra Amra, Yava Yisin Avela, V'yachal Isachelev, Yava Yisachrev, Yava V'yachal Isachelev. You know what the answer is? It's very simple. The word treif is not extra. You want to know why? Again, we're dealing with the Tumas Nevela, which has one major halacha by a cow. The cow is tamei, except for the chaylev. When describing the chaylev, it mentions the word treif, which we said is extra. The answer is not extra. I'll tell you why. It's telling me a halacha that if I eat the chaylev of a treif animal, I'm over two isurim. I'm over chaylev and I'm over treif. The chiddush of the pasuk by mentioning the word treif is purely to tell me that if you eat the chaylev of a cow, which is always aser, because chaylev is never a forbidden part of a permitted part of the animal, but if you eat the chaylev of a cow that's treif, you're over two isurim. And that's also, by the way, why it says nevela by a cow. It's purely to tell me that if I eat the chaylev of a cow, whether it's nevela or treif, I'm over two isurim. One for chaylev, and the second for nevela or treif. So it's not extra anymore. And by the way, that doesn't apply to a bird because there's no chaylev by a bird. So says the Gemara says utzrichi, and the reason why this is needed, meaning, why would I think not? I'll tell you why. Im ashmina nevela. If the pasuk tells me a chiddush that if I eat the nevela of chaylev, if the chaylev of a nevela, I'm over 2 isurim, I would say mishum de metama. I would say because nevela is very severe. There's a whole tumas nevela. Treif, there's no tumas treif. Maybe if the animal is treif, there is no second isur. Aval treif emaloi v'yashmin and treif. And if the pasuk tells me that if you eat the chaylev of a treifa, you're over 2 isurim, I would say a treifa mishum de isurim echayim, because treif is very severe because it's a problem that emerges when the animal's alive. But nevela not. Maybe there is no 2 isurim by nevela. Avavela emaloi tzricha. Okay, we finished this little bit. Very good. We're out of the woods. I think now we're fine now. I think we're okay, ish. So the Gemara says, it's like from the horror movies, my hand sticks up. I think we're just going to hang out in this pet cemetery. I think we should be all right. So the Gemara says like this. Again, how do we get into this? We got into this because if you have a bird that you shechted, and it turns out to be treif, is there tumah or not? Rabbi Yehuda says there is. Rabbi Meir says there is not. Rabbi Yehuda says there is because the word treif is extra by a bird to tell me that there's always tumah, even if the animal's treif. I'm saying even if the animal's treif, even if you shechted it, there is tumah. Rabbi Meir disagreed. Rabbi Meir feels that if you shecht a bird, tumah goes away. I don't care that it's treif. Tumah goes away. So what does Rabbi Meir do with the word treif? Again, Rabbi Yehuda used the word treif to prove his opinion that if you shecht a bird and you find that it's treif, there's tumah. Rabbi Meir disagrees. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Meir hay treif in my ovidle. What does Rabbi Meir do with the word treif? So the Gemara says, Mi boile lemute shchita shilafnim. He uses the word treif to tell me, and we had this yesterday, that if I shecht a bird in the Beis HaMikdash, the tumah goes away. Even if I shecht a non-carbon, but if I shecht a chicken in the Beis HaMikdash, the tumah goes away. Because the word treif tells me that it dafka has to be, it's dafka because it was not shechted properly, but if it was shechted properly, even if it's you took a chicken, you went into the Beis HaMikdash, you even said it's a carbon, which is not a thing, and then you shechted it. Zalman took our crew. So the Gemara says, okay. We have problems here. We got someone calling the owner is taking our crew away. So anyways, the Gemara says, so if you shecht the chicken inside the Beis HaMikdash, the tumah goes away. So says the Gemara of Rabbi Yehuda. How does Rabbi Yehuda know this? Because he uses treif for his halacha. Treif achri niksiv. There's a second word treif to tell you that. Rabbi Meir, what does he do with the second treif? The Gemara says, chad lemute shchita shilafnim, chad lemute oif tameh. One is to tell me that if you shecht the chicken inside the Beis HaMikdash, the tumah goes away. And one is to tell me that a non-kosher bird does not have tumah. Like an owl does not have tumah. These tumahs only apply to kosher species. For Rabbi Yehuda, how does Rabbi Yehuda know that these tumahs do not apply to non-kosher species? Min nevela nafka. He learns it out from nevela. For Rav Meir, hi nevela ma'avile. What does Rav Meir do with nevela? L'myute achilas kazayis. Rav Meir tells me that the word achila, you know what nevela tells me? Nevela tells me, we're talking about it by a bird tumah. How do you get tameh by a bird? You have to eat it. How much of it do you have to eat? A tiny piece? The answer is a kazayis. The word nevela tells me that the same way by the isser nevela, it's a kazayis, so over here it's a kazayis. You have to eat a kazayis to become tameh. Says the Gemara, v'teipa klei, wait a minute, what do I need that for? Mikra kama avar rachman b'loshan achila. The pasuk describes the tumah as toichal. Toichal is always kazayis. So why do I need nevela to tell me kazayis? Can't I figure out kazayis from the word toichal? Toichal always in Torah means a kazayis. So says the Gemara, basically, in other words, you have the word toichal, which implies a kazayis. You have the word nevela, implies a kazayis. What do I need both? So the answer is, one is to tell me the amount of the bird that you have to eat to become tameh, and one is to tell me how quickly you have to eat it. This is called kadei achilas pras, which is you have to eat the kazayis within a certain amount of time. And the amount of time that eats to half a loaf of bread, which you say 4 to 9 minutes, is the different opinions. The point is, so one is to tell me you have to eat a kazayis to become tameh, and one is to tell me how quickly you have to eat that kazayis. Says the Gemara, chad l'shir achila b'kazayis, b'chad l'shir achila b'kadei achilas pras. Sol kadai t'chamina, you might think, hoyel v'chidishu, because this whole concept of tumah via the throat is a chiddush. It is not normal. It is not normal to become tameh while eating something. Normally, you're only tameh when you touch something. The tameh through eating is not normal, and therefore you might think that it's a chiddush, it has its own halachas, and therefore it doesn't require kadei achilas pras. Kamash malo, no, kadei achilas pras is applicable like everything else. You have to eat a kazayis, a kadei achilas pras. All right, let's turn on the jets a little bit. Okay, Tan Rabbanon, Brisa teaches chaylev nevela v'chaylev treifa. This is again talking about a kosher animal. At least we'll see in a moment. We have to prove it's a kosher animal. That a kosher animal has it. When a kosher animal dies, the animal is tamei except for the chaylev. Non-kosher animal, everything's tamei. But by a kosher animal, the animal's tamei except for the chaylev. Says the Gemara, chaylev nevela v'chaylev treifa. The question is this pasuk talking about a kosher animal or not? I told you it is, and it's telling me that a kosher animal, the animal's tamei except for the chaylev. Maybe the pasuk is talking about chazer. Chazers also have chaylev. I mean, it's not really negate to us that much because you can't eat it because it's chazer. But the question is, maybe the pasuk is actually talking about non-kosher animals. So it says the Gemara, b'chaylev behema tahira kasam daber. The pasuk is talking about a kosher species, which is obviously what we conclude. Maybe the pasuk is talking about non-kosher species. Again, here's a chiddush. You have two choices. Okay, you have everything being tameh or the chaylev being tahar. So which one is by a kosher and which is by non-kosher? We're saying the chaylev being tahar is by a kosher species. And a non-kosher species have separate halachas. Says Gemara, how do you know this? Gemara says, well, Amrit, I'll think about it. Tihar mechlal shchuta, the tihar mechlal chaylev. Well, I know that when you shecht an animal, when you have a cow and you shecht it, right, the tumah goes away. Outside of the animal being forget about it. When you shecht an animal, the tumah goes away. Is there a way to remove tumas of a chazer? No. So the same way, when you shecht an animal, it goes away, that's talking about a kosher species. So to the chaylev not being tameh, it's also mistama talking about a kosher species. Amar tahar mechlal shchuta v'tir mechlal chaylev. Ma kashatir mechlal shchuta b'torah v'lo tameya. Av kashatir mechlal chaylev b'torah v'lo tameya. The Gemara says, or the opposite. Again, why would I think? Again, this is the pasuk says that the chaylev of a dead animal is tahar. So the Gemara wants to know, it's talking about a kosher animal or non-kosher animal. It says, well, kosher animal. Why? Because when you shecht an animal, tumah goes away. So kosher animals have less tumah. So mistama, the chaylev is also going away. The Gemara says, yeah, but what about a bird? I told you when we started, one of the strange things about a bird is that by a bird, if the kosher animal is tameh, but by a kosher animal, one second, I gotta focus. By a bird, a kosher animal is tameh. A non-kosher animal is entirely tahar. So again, just to review, you have the chaylev of an animal that is tahar. We wanted to know, is this talking about a kosher animal or not? So the Gemara said, well, it's probably talking about a kosher animal. Why? Because by a regular animal, when you shecht it, the tumah goes away. So you see the kosher animals, and that's by kosher, obviously not a chazer, you're not shechting a chazer. So you see by kosher animals, the tumah goes away quicker. So mistama, the chaylev also going away, is talking about a kosher animal. So the Gemara says, what about birds though? Bird, the entire owl is tahar. Non-kosher birds don't have tumah. So maybe when it says chaylev by an animal of being tahar, it's talking about non-kosher animals. You say, why would it be a non-kosher animal? Because non-kosher birds are completely tahar. So you see that like tahara is more common by non-kosher animals. In other words, so when the pasuk says the chaylev is tahar, but the animal, the carcass, is tameh, is that talking about a kosher animal or not? Do you compare it to? Do you say, well, mistama kosher animals are more tahar? Do you say, well, non-kosher birds are more tahar? So, well, we'll see. So the Gemara says, like klech derzu, tir mechlal nevela, b'tir mechlal chaylev. Ma kashetir mechlal nevela, b'tmei v'lo b'tayra, av kashetir mechlal chaylev b'tmei v'lo b'tayra. So in other words, how do I know what this pasuk is talking about? Amr, go to the next page. Kishabar b'derech zuhi b'tayra, kishabar b'derech zuhi b'tmei. I can compare it to a kosher animal or non-kosher animal. Which direction do I go? Tam and loymar treifa, misheyesh mina treifa. The pasuk says treif. Treif is obviously only referring to kosher animals because treif is not a vernacular that applies to non-kosher animals because non-kosher animals are not treif. And therefore, when the pasuk says that the chaylev of a treif is tar, it's obviously talking about kosher animals. Says the Gemara, Oitzi, just to finish this little bit, and then it's a new topic which is a lot easier. Oitzi asatmeya she'em b'mina treifa v'lo oitzi asachaya. What about a chaya? A chaya, which is a kosher animal, should it be more comparable to a cow, which is tameh except for the chaylev, or to a chazer, which is entirely tameh? Sheyesh min treifa tamaloymer ba'ochol loy tachluhu mi shechalva asa b'sara muter yatsa chaya shechalva b'sara muter. Because a chaya, the entire animal has one status, i.e., edible. The entire animal, therefore, is tameh. In other words, a chaya is more comparable when it comes to the carcass tumah of a chazer than a kosher animal. Because a chaya, the entire animal is in one category, like a chazer. Now, a chaya, the entire animal is kosher, a chazer, the entire animal is non-kosher, but it's not comparable to a cow, and therefore a chaya has a status of a chazer. When the chaya dies, everything's tameh, including the chaylev. Says the Gemara, Omerle Rav Yaakov bar Abba l'Rava. According to you that you're telling me, now this is a little bit of a confusion on his part. I mentioned before that an entire non-kosher species is tahar. That was birds. He thought he meant animals. He said, so by animals, the animal is tahar. So Amarle Kama Sabi Shabishraba. Why do so many elders like you make the same mistake? Safe Aslan and Velo Safe Tami. I was talking about birds. Birds, a non-kosher animal is tahar. Non-kosher birds are tahar. Non-kosher animals are actually incredibly tameh. Okay, we're done with this little sugya. New topic. Ish. We're here until the end of the parak because it's close. It's not the same, but it's slightly different. Okay. Rav Yochanan. So you remember how Rav Meir, in almost entirely different topic, said that if you shecht a bird and then it's tameh and then it's treif, if you shecht a bird and then it's treif, the tumah goes away. Right? Shecht the bird, find out it's treif, according to Rameir, the tumah goes away. Amar Rav Yochanan, loitia Rameir ela b'tzmimim. Rameir only said his shita if the bird was without a mum, meaning other than the treif part. But if treif is not necessarily a mum. Treif is, it's a big mum. It's a mum. I think what it means is complete with a limbs, all limbs intact. Meaning, Rameir said, if I shecht a chicken, and it turns out it's a treif chicken, tumah still goes away. That's a mayor. What if I shecht the chicken, turns out it's treif, turns out it's also missing both legs. So, says Rav Yochanan, that is tameh. Rameir only said it if all the limbs are intact. Comes Avmali Mumen Loi, Rav Elazar Mafil Bali Mumen. Rav Elazar said, no, even if the animal is missing limbs, doesn't matter. If you shecht a bird, it could be missing limbs, it could be treif, tumah goes away. That's Rameir shita. Keep going. Itmarnami Amar Bibi Amar Rav Elazar Mitayr Rameir bebali mumen afilu ba'azim v'tanagolim. Oh, Rameir held that. Yeah, Rameir Mitayr Hari Rameir. One second. Go back. I want to go back 2 lines. I want to clarify. Rameir's shita is. Yeah, Rameir's shita is twofold. I'm sorry. We're not talking about shchita anymore. We're actually talking about malika. My bad. Rameir had 2 shitas. If I shecht a bird, and it turns out it's treif, the tumahs go away, then Rameir took it a step further. If I do malika on a bird, on a carbon, I have a little pigeon, it's a carbon, I do malika, turns out it's treif, tumah also goes away. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yochanan, loitir Rameir ela b'tmimim. Rameir only said this halacha on a carbon that has all its limbs. Avol bibali mumen loy. But if the carbon was missing limbs, then, because it's mamish not roy for a carbon, besides for the treif part, then the tumah remains. Rav Elazar, Mafil bali mumen. Rav Elazar said, no. If you do malika on a bird, and then you find out it's treif, the tumah goes away, even if the animal is missing limbs. But now here's the added chiddush. This is something I don't think any of us would have understood. Take it a step further. Itmarnami Amar Rabbi Amar Rav Elazar. Mitayhar Rameir bibali mumen. Rameir held that if you do malika on a bird, even if it's a mum, the tumah goes away. Afilu avzim v'tarnagolim. Even geese or chickens. Now, geese or chickens are not fit to be a carbon, but if you take a chicken, you go into the Beis HaMikdash and you say, this is my carbon, you do malika on the chicken, which is, by the way, very hard to do, because they have very thick necks. You do malika on the chicken, tumah goes away. This is a tremendous chiddush. Now, this is where we're going to take us to the end of the daf. That means, according to Rameir, the same way, here's the point, though. I thought it would be 35-minute daf. Turns out it's going to be 40. So it's like this. According to Rameir, the same way malika on a carbon removes the tumah, malika now he's extending it to all birds. All birds. As long as you're doing, and you're not even doing a process that applies to these birds, but as long as you're doing a process that applies to some birds and you're doing it on other kosher birds, tumah goes away. That's Rameir's shita. So says the Gemara, okay, I'll play your game. I have my own. What about the following thing? There's a concept called egla rufa. Egla rufa is you take a small egel, when there's a murder, right? Take a hatchet, basically hit him in the back of the neck, kill him like that. I did way too hard on myself. You hit on the back of the neck, and it kills the egel. We assume tumah goes away. Even though that's not a shechita, because we assume that that's the shechita of the egel. See, here's the thing. I do the same thing, but instead of a calf, I do it on a goat. I take a goat, take a hatchet, hit in the back of the head. The same way Rav Meir would say, the malika on a chicken removes the tumah. Arufa on a goat also removes the tumah. Says the Gemara, by Rav Yirmiyah, Oref Eiz Mahu. What if you did arufa on a goat instead of on an egel? Instead of egel arufa, you did Eiz arufa. So would it also remove the tumah? So avzim v'tarnagolim taimamai. Well, if he's extending it to geese and chicken by malika, which is not appropriate to them, demina doifus ninu. At least, but you could argue over there, they're at least all birds. Over here, it's a different species. Goat and calves are not the same species, so maybe it doesn't apply. They're all animals. They're all domesticated animals. So the question is, what would Rav Meir say about doing an arufa on a goat? Would that remove the tumah? So Yosef Rav Dima the Gemara says, and this is going to take us to the end of the parak. Forget about it. We don't answer the question. But you're making a presumption, and that is that in Egla Arufa, after you do the ceremony, the decapitation of the Egla Arufa, the tumah goes away. And then your question is, well, what would apply to a goat? But you're assuming that when you do Egla Arufa, the tumah of the Egla Arufa goes away. Is that true? So the Gemara says, Amalei in, yeah. I'll tell you why, because the pasuk says kapara, which implies that it's like a kachim, and the same way by a karban, the malika and the shechita process removes the tumah, so to egla arufa the tumah is removed. Now here's the issue. So you're telling me when you do an egla arufa, there is no tumas nevela anymore. Here's the problem. There's a special pasuk, as we're going to see in a moment, that the chaylev of an egla arufa is tahar. If the animal itself is tahar, I don't need a pasuk to tell me the chaylev is tahar. If the animal is tamei, so I need a pasuk to tell me the chaylev is tamei. But if you're telling me an egla arufa, the tumah goes away on the entire animal, what do I need a pasuk for to tell me the chaylev is also tar? Of course the chaylev is tar. If the animal's tar, the chaylev is tar. Says the Gemara, Masir Rav Nasan bar Ravua de bar Rav Huna, v'achalei tachlu. Ein leil chaylev she'aser ba'achilu mutabahno. Chaylev sheshar niskal ve'egla aruf minayin. How do I know that the egla aruf's chaylev is tahar? Tamalemer kol chaylev. So wait a minute. If you think the animal itself is tahar, do I need a pasuk to tell me the chaylev is tahar? The fact that the pasuk tells me the chaylev is tahar implies that the animal itself is tameh. So says the Gemara, he tahar v'chal v'tameh. So the Gemara, again, so we're dealing with this issue, and this is going to take us to the end. If I did egla arufa, is there a carcass tumah on the egla arufa? So we said no. The problem is this pasuk just said that the chaylev is tahar, which implies that the carcass itself is tameh. So is the egla arufa tahar or not? Oh, by the way, even if, so that's the question. Is the egla arufa tahar or not? So the Gemara says, if you actually did an egla arufa process, you actually decapitated the proper way, tumah's gone. When do I need a pasuk to tell me the chaylev is tahar? That's when you did shechita. If you shechted the egla arufa, then there is tumah. So says the Gemara, wait a minute, I thought shechting the egla arufa, I thought shechita always removes the tumah. So what's going on? Says the Gemara, ki yitzur chaylev shachla mishchan. Wait, tahani li shechita tar midei nevela, leitzicha shemesa. No, the answer is like this. You do egla arufa, tumah goes away. You shecht an egla arufa, tumah goes away. If an egla arufa on your way to do egla arufa gets a heart attack and dies, that's when it's tameh, and the pasuk says that the chaylev is tahar. So says the Gemara, michlal de mechayim asura. So you're telling me that when I'm walking with the egla arufa, it's already aser, right? It's already considered like it has an issue, and then the animal dies, the tumah remains. Why you michlal de mechayim asura? The pasuk said that you're saying when the pasuk says the chaylev is tahar, it's talking about a chaylev of an egla arufa. And what's the case? The egla arufa just dropped dead. How is it an egla arufa then? Isn't it just a small cow? Egla arufa means something that you did the process to. What's the difference in an egla arufa and a small little baby cow? A little baby cow, you didn't do anything to it. So if I take an egla arufa and I'm on my way to do egla arufa and then it drops dead, you're like, I don't know if the chaylev is tar. You say, why not? It's a regular cow. If the chaylev is tar, it's egla arufa. What makes an egla arufa? I didn't do anything to it. So says the Gemara, Amar of Yanai Kavul Shamati B'Shachachti. I had heard this and I forgot this. V'naz bin Chavri L'Meimar. My friends explained it to me. Yeridasai L'Nachal Eisan Hiasrasa. When you take the egla arufa to Nachal Eisan, it already has the status of an egla arufa. It's already aser b'hana. Hence, I need a pasuk to tell me that the chaylev is tahar. Hajjan alach chata sa'if.
Tomorrow's ready today.